studying this closely because of the fact that we found in the Old Testament in Numbers chapter 23 verse 19 and in 1 John, a statement or two statements that were really significant to all of us as people who have been kind of following religious journeys all of our life. In the book of Numbers, it identifies God, and it says God is not a man. And that's something that we haven't really dwelled upon a lot as people and going to church, because we've been praying to a man, and we've been asking a father and all this stuff, and all of a sudden our eyes are drawn to this statement: what you're calling God is not a man, not a human. Not a human. And so then we started thinking, goodness gracious, how do we communicate? And if it's not a human, what is it? So then we look in the New Testament, and it comes back, and he said, God is light. Well, once this is made clear, it opens up a whole new thing about what does light do, how does light impact us, and then we find that NASA puts out a paper we've been studying for several weeks, that they are now developing optical computers run by light, that can do in 1 hour what a computer today would take 11 years to do. And that this light, they have found that in order to make this work, they use membrane, organic tissue, living human tissue. And so now we're reaching the stage of proving the fact that light, God, coming down from above on an angle of light, an angel of light, a messenger particle, or as scientists say, a photon, can actually enter into our bodies and change logic circuits, change the way we think, change the way we feel. So it really becomes a very, very interesting thing. So we started then studying in depth the pineal gland of the brain. And the pineal gland plays a very prominent part in the Bible, because Jesus says, if your eye be single, your body will fill with light, which we now know is God. And then Jacob says, I have seen God face to face, and I'll call the place Peniel. So we have the Old Testament telling us God is not a man. We have the New Testament telling us God is light. We have the New Testament saying, if your eye be single. And we have the Old Testament saying, I've seen God, it's at the pineal. And then we had René Descartes, the 1600s philosopher from France, who tells us that the place where God meets you inside of your body is the pineal gland of the brain. So then we spent a week or two analyzing this pineal gland of the brain, and we found that it is inhibited by light. See, like an animal, like what would you call, like a salamander, or one of these vertebrates that hang out in the swamps and so forth, their pineal gland is open and closed by light with a lack of light. But in a human being, it's attached to your eyes. So you regulate it. It then becomes up to you, see, if you're going to go into a dark place and close your eyes, or if you're going to open your eyes, and in which case the pineal would shut down. In either case, it's going to secrete melatonin at around 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock in the morning. So we function with the pineal gland. And what my concern about all of this is this. Okay, we know that light comes down from above on an angle, and it's been doing that for millions of years. And we know that people have been meditating for thousands of years, at least hundreds. And the world's still pretty much of a mess. So what has been missing? What can you do as a human being to place yourself into a harmony with this light? Because we've proved by NASA, in a statement that they said electrons are attracted by photons and vice versa. Well, if a photon is an angle of light from above, God, And if the electron is in the pineal gland and you stimulate that, then you are attracting an angle of light, or you are attracting an angel of God. But how do you do this? And can you do it? I mean, Jesus says, if your eye be single, your body will fill with light. Fine. So we're talking about stimulating the pineal gland. Can you do that? Is it possible for you to do that? I mean, is walking into a dark room enough? Well, walking into a dark room will open the pineal gland, yes. But I mean, people have been walking into dark rooms forever, and it doesn't seem to have stimulated anything necessarily positive. Gosh, I mean, if we look at the brutalization of people in different parts of the world's a mess. It's not a mess for me. I've got a nice house, got a nice wife, got beautiful cars, got all this stuff, go to Atlantic City and eat chocolate and do, not as much as I used to, but do all this stuff. I'm having a good time. But while I'm having a good time, I know that there are kids and people in different places in the world that are living in cardboard and starving and all of these terrible things happen. When I'm having a good time, I see pictures on television of the brutalization of little dogs and cats and greyhounds and all this. What the heck is this? So I'm having a good time and I'm enjoying it, but a vast amount of life has been terribly brutalized. So something is wrong. Something is wrong. How do I change it? Can I change it? How do I change myself? How do you start to flow in a harmony with this photon, with this angel of light, with God? So we studied then, if there is going to be one place in your body, it is not going to be in your heart, it's not going to be in your hand, it's not going to be in your elbow, it's going to be in your pineal gland, because that's the light receptor of the body. So if what we want to happen, if what is going to happen is what you've been trying to make happen all of these years going to church, then it's going to have to center here. And we've got scriptural proof of that. We've got the proof of the Bible in the Old Testament, which says, I shall call the place pineal. We've got the proof of the Bible in the New Testament, which says, practice the single eye. We've got the statement of René Descartes, who said that's where the soul and the body meet in your body. It's in the pineal gland. And René Descartes was not just a philosopher. René Descartes gave us the basis of our theory of light, the laws of reflection and refraction. So, I mean, he was an extremely competent witness. But how do we activate the pineal gland? What can you do to start flowing in a harmony, especially in this time of Eta Carina, this great star that is sending down DNA and changing the DNA? I mean, my God, in Canada last week, I don't know if you read about this, they cured 13 people of type 1 diabetes. Not made them feel better, cured it. Now, there's a hang-up to that. They have to take this medicine that stops rejection. But the point is, they've cured. I mean, and the doctors from the Sloan Kettering Cancer Institute in New York say that disease as we know it will not exist in 5 years. That cancer will be gone in 5 years. I mean, and I told this to one person, said, well, I would think 50. What do you mean you would think 50? These are scientists from Sloan Kettering that say 5. I'm going with that. But what's happening? How come they're learning all of these things about DNA, about genetics? And they're learning, let's stop trying to kill cancer cells. Let's find the switch and turn it off. You see, let me tell you something. There are some people that say, well, I think, like René Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. And I create this life on the basis of my thoughts. You, as this angle of light that nested in your mother's womb at birth, or, gestation period, you're one part of the thought process. You share your body with others who are also in their thinking. You think, oh, I'm going to live, I'm going to I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and do the other thing. And there are cells inside of your body that are thinking, we're going to go over here. And when they go over there, you're going to get very sick. So, and the reason they're going over there instead of staying over here where they belong is because they're reading your DNA, and your DNA is screwed up. And your DNA is saying, go over there instead of stay here. So inside of a human body, there are other people, if you wish to call them that, who are plotting things, planning things, and going to act these things out, regardless of what you think. And you know what's going to happen then? When they do what they do, then your thinking is going to change. Totally. All of a sudden, you're going to wake one day, and when I say you, I'm not. But all of a sudden, somebody then wakes one day, and somebody goes to a doctor because they don't quite feel well. Why? Because other things inside of you decided on something that you had nothing to do with, and it made you sick. So you're not the only one inside of that body thinking. And when they decide on something different for you, then the doctor said, well, I hate to tell you this, but what? What the heck how could this happen? Because some other living entity inside of your body decided to do something. And the reason that that living entity inside of your body decided to do something was because you have a DNA and it's A, B, C, D, but in there it was A, B, F, C, and the cells read this instead of reading that, and so they went over here when they should have stayed here, and it screwed everything up. So now, the scientists are finding out all of a sudden, hey, wait a minute. You know how we can heal this cancer? You know how we can heal this Alzheimer's? You know how we can heal this diabetes? Let's do this. Let's find out how we can reboot this thing. Did you ever reboot a computer? Computer doesn't work. It's all screwed up. Everything, hey, what the heck is this? I can't get this to work. I'm hitting the thing. Shut it off. And you shut it off and turn it back on again. It's fine. So let's do something because the cells are reading this and thinking that they should be here when they shouldn't be here. Let's get rid of this. Let's clean it out. You see, that when you went to church when you were a little kid, they used to say everybody's born with original sin. You know what it is? It's screwed up DNA is exactly what they were talking about. They didn't know they were talking about that, but that's what they were talking about, mutant DNA. So we'll get rid of that. And now not only will the disease stop because these cells will stop multiplying and they'll say, whoa, wait a minute. We shouldn't be over here. Let's get back where we belong. And that's the end of that. So this is what they're finding, and these are the wonderful things. So we want to start to flow in a harmony because the reason that the scientists are finding all this stuff out is that they are having gates in their brains opened by light coming from above. And it's opening the gates and giving them understanding. So we focus then on, let's focus on the pineal gland of the brain because that is the place, that is the light receptor of the brain. And that's why I encourage you to come out in meditation for your children's sake. I mean, you want your kids to have, you want you to have this. This is the time to do it. And I would suggest you come out of here. You come in, this room gets absolutely pitch black. And when it's pitch black and dark in here and the sounds, you then focus on the pineal gland. It opens and you receive the angels of light to change what must be changed and to correct what must be corrected. But the point is, and you have a right to ask me this question, is it possible to do that? Now, let me just show you something from Dr. Alfred Louis, which was taken from the New York Times in overhead 283. And in overhead 283, if you could, Al, if you could just focus on this. In my briefcase, there's that little gray thing that I use for the, okay. But anyhow, here, this is pineal gland hormone can reset the body's clock. And what it says here, after traveling through nerves in the spinal cord, the signal reaches the pineal gland. In the absence of light, the gland begins the production of melatonin. Darkness stimulates production of the hormone melatonin. Production is abruptly suppressed in bright light. Thank you. Okay? So this, and look what I said, understanding the hormone of darkness. And so when we have meditation then on Tuesday night, the room is absolutely dark. So we went through several scientific articles last week, if you remember, which basically said the same thing, namely that the pineal gland is active in the absence of light. It is the body's time clock. And it functions via the two physical eyes, leaving it up to you as to when you choose to activate it, other than when it does it by itself when you sleep at night. So the evidence was very conclusive, I think. So it appears that the pineal gland of the brain is suppressed by bright light. It appears that it's not active in the light. Another word for the pineal gland, and you can look this in a scientific Stedman's Medical Dictionary, the pineal gland is known by another word which people in religion are very familiar with. The pineal gland is also known as epiphysis. In religion, we have holy days called Epiphany. It means enlightenment. If you look in Stedman's Medical Dictionary, you'll say pineal gland. It tells what it does. It says also KKA, epiphysis. If the pineal is epiphany, if the pineal is the pineal that Jacob referred to in Genesis 32, if it is the single eye that Jesus referred to, then wouldn't it seem reasonable that when meditating to make contact with the supreme light being you know as God, one would stimulate it when it was most energetically reacting, which would be in darkness. So what is interesting about this is the fact that the light, which is God, according to the Scriptures, is darkness. The light and the dark are the same thing. In order to see the light, you've got to activate the pineal, because the light that you're going to see is invisible and can't be seen. Okay. What the heck is he talking about? Watch. If you have, for instance, let's look at this way. Here you have God is light. But it is light that cannot be seen. Okay. It cannot be seen. So it's ultraviolet or a form of light that is even beyond the spectrum that we understand. But it's an invisible light. So your pineal gland could see it in the darkness because it's not the kind of light like this is light, all right? So here then you go into the darkness because you're going to try to activate that gland which can see this light, and you open the pineal. And here then the pineal is able to see this light, which is no physical light at all. It's electromagnetism is what it is. Okay? So in order to see the light, one must activate the pineal gland because this light is invisible and cannot be seen with the physical eyes. It can only be seen by that single eye. So since we can't see in the dark, and the light, which is God, cannot be seen, it would mean, ready for this one, that the light is actually the dark, and the dark is actually the light. In other words, here I'm standing here in the light. You all can see me. But I cannot see the light that is God, which is invisible light. Can you? Look around. So I know that in order for me to see that light, I should be in the dark, so that the light receptor, which is the pineal gland, would see that. There are several scriptures that are significant when considering this. Let's look at overhead B47 for a minute. Look at this. Psalms 18:11. He made darkness his secret place. Okay? When you pray, enter into your closet, shut the door, and pray to your Father, which is in secret. Whoa, wait a minute. You see two words there that are very similar? Secret and secret. Pray to your Father in secret, in his secret place. Where? In the darkness. Meditate in the darkness. Look at Amos here. Woe unto you that desire the day of the Lord. To what end is it for you? The day of the Lord is darkness and not light. And again, shall not the day of the Lord be darkness and not light, even very dark and no brightness in it? Why? Why does it have to be dark? Because the pineal gland becomes active in the darkness. And Jacob says, I have seen God face to face. You see, and I did this again last night. You may not like that. You may say, I want to meditate in the daytime. Go ahead. And I do too. Go to the beach. And it's 250 degrees and the sun is shining and everybody's sweating to meditate. Go ahead. And it's a beautiful place to meditate. Meditate about the family, meditate about your health, but you're not going to make contact for a particular reason that the pineal gland is going to be closed down in that bright light. You've got to do this according to the way nature says to do it. Maybe the church doesn't like that. Maybe the pastors don't like that. Maybe the priests and the rabbis don't like that. But that's irrelevant, because this is evidently the way that the light likes it. You're created that way. Remember what we said last week? I don't like to use my mouth to talk with. I don't think I have to use my mouth to make sounds with. I would rather talk to you like this. And so here I go. I make contact. I make contact with you this way. Well, it doesn't work. I have to use this whether I want to or not. You have to use the pineal gland in the dark if you want to make contact with this light. So there we are directed to understand that the darkness is the secret place of God. That when we pray, we should enter the secret place, which is obviously darkness. And that the day of the Lord is darkness, even very dark, and no brightness in it. And we have developed convincing evidence that the pineal gland, which Jacob noted when he saw God face to face, is active in the dark. Look at overhead B8. And in overhead B8, it's a little difficult to see, but here it says, Genesis 32:30, I have seen God face to face. That means he has come face to face with this light, and Jacob called the name of the place Peniel. And it's in the scriptures. Now let's consider another factor with anatomy and the pineal gland of the brain. I want to show you overhead 10, and I want to show you which is a brain. Well, it is. You want to see? Did you ever see an angel? Turn it upside down. Right there. Okay. There's your angels. Okay, you're going to turn it back there. But let me show you something here which is interesting. The words I want you to look at here, if you can come up a little bit, okay? The ventricle interior, okay. Can you come down here, Joe? Okay, right there, okay. This is talking about the third ventricle. Its sides are formed by the optic thalami by a delicate band of light fibers, the stria pinealis. You see that right there? Stria pinealis. S-T-R-I-A P-I-N-E-A-L-I-S. Stria pinealis means straight line from the pineal. The straight line from the pineal. Okay, so we got a straight line from the pineal. Now if you lift this up, which runs along the junction, blah, 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 to join the pillars of the fornix. You see that? Okay. So we have the pineal, and from the pineal we have a straight line which was stria pinealis, and it joins at the fornix of the brain. So there's a connection there. The word fornix means vault, and it is connected to the constellation word fornax, which means furnace. So here we have a situation in which the pineal gland of the brain receives the fire from the solar plexus, which is the place of the sun in your body, which runs up the spine, impacts the pineal gland, which is the light. The signal or the fire is then sent along the fuse, which is the stria pinealis, to the fornix or the furnace, which lights the furnace, and according to the scriptures, the three, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, then are joined by the fourth. Well, all of that is mythology, and what it's saying is that when the fire from the solar plexus rises in meditation, impacts the pineal, it follows a fuse which is called stria pinealis to the fornix or the furnace, and there your physical, your intellectual, and your emotional are then joined by the fourth, which is the spiritual. So the whole basis of all the stories and all of this stuff happens based on anatomy, based on what goes on inside of your body, based on what goes on inside of your head, based on what is the connection between all of the things in the sky. You've got a single eye in the sky. You've got a fornax in the sky. Because the same thing happens in this great brain, which is the universe, as happens inside of you. There's a very strange verse. So you see this? You see the fire, pineal. You see the straight line, stria pinealis. And you see the furnace. Okay? There's a very strange scripture that shows up in Genesis chapter 15. And it doesn't mean anything because, well, look what it says. And it came to pass that when the sun went down, and it was dark, behold, a smoking furnace and a burning lamp that passed between these two. Did you ever even consider, probably you've never even seen this before. But could you ever understand that this is mythological statements of symbolism, dark sayings, talking about the activity inside of your brain and what happens to bring you enlightenment, what happens to bring you healing, what happens to bring you eternal life? You talk about eternal life. The doctors and the scientists are now talking about when they have this DNA all corrected and mapped out, people living 300, 400, 500 years. And so there, again, we have the fact that this smoking furnace that delivers you, that brings this angel of God, angel of light to you, the fornix of your brain is touched by the fire, the burning lamp, the pineal gland. When? When it's dark. So you got to do it this way. I don't really care where you do it. Go out and sit in the car at night, or go in the bathroom, turn the light off. Do it for a few minutes. So the text indicates the location of God or light to be in the dark place. Now remember something. And consider this. This third eye, this pineal gland, is not privy to the Bible or to the followers of Jesus who spoke of the single eye. You remember we found it in the text in Overhead 233? You remember the text of Aridamus when Aridamus entered in? It was the eye of Horus, the all-seeing eye of the gods in the temple of the living God, and there the eye opened. So there was this ancient Egyptian text about that single eye, which we've seen in the sky. Let me show you what I'm talking about. When I talk to you about the star, Eta Carina, sending down angles of light to touch you with the pineal gland, let me show you a carving that they found on the wall in the ancient temple in Luxor in Egypt. Take a look at that. There's the star. Eta Carina, is it? There's the angle of light. And look at where it's impacting. Bang. So they knew. And we lost it. People shouldn't be, Uncle Joe or Uncle Don or Aunt Tilly or mother or whatever died at 70, 80 years old. They're kids. They shouldn't have. But we abandoned all of this. And we replaced it with stuff that nobody has ever proven one iota about and has no basis in science at all. This has a basis in science because of the fact that right now the National Aeronautics and Space Administration is talking about photons and optical computers between the brain and the sky, which they say is the future of space communication. So in other words, these people who drew that have been fulfilled by NASA. The churches that we have up and down this highway have been fulfilled by nobody. And then, of course, we had Overhead 260, which talked of the eyes of the white head are diverse from all. Above the eye is no eyelid, neither is there an eyebrow. This eye is never closed, and the two are converted into one. All is right, there is no left. And then the wise ever behold the highest step of Vishnu. This is from the Kabbalah, the ancient Hebrews. This is from the Hindus, in the eye of Vishnu. And then, my goodness gracious, have you looked? Have you looked and see what your Hubble has? I mean, you're paying for Hubble. Have you seen what they took a picture of? Take a look. That's the astronomy picture of the day. The eye of the Hourglass Nebula. Forget Vishnu. You can't deal with Vishnu because it's Hindu? Okay. Forget Kabbalah. You can't deal with it because it's Jewish? Forget Aridamus. You can't deal with it because it's Egyptian? What are you going to do with this? You paid for that. And that was taken by, and when I had that surgery done on my eyes, I went and I handed, we put this in a frame, and I gave a copy of this to the surgeon who operated on my eyes, and he looked at Joan and I, and he said, "This is a human eye." I said, bingo. Who could better tell that's a human eye than a guy who takes them apart and puts them back together again? If your eye be single, your body will fill with light. Look what is up in the sky. And people will say, well, I don't know if I believe that. I could care less whether anybody believes it. All I can do is be God and use the words of the late, great Humphrey Bogart. Here's looking at you, kid. And so it doesn't make any difference. We had better start to get with the program, because look who's coming to dinner. And if you look here, you not only can see the eye, but you can see the nose here. You can almost see as if somebody's looking through a keyhole at you. And they are. Uh-huh. And so here it is, all laid out for you. I got to show, because there's some people here that weren't here last week. I got to show you something. Well, let me show you let me show the scriptures first, Joan. Right there. Yeah, that's good. That's great. Let me just show you this real quick. You think the eye is something? I set my bow in the cloud, and it's going to be a covenant. I will bring a cloud, the bow shall be seen in the cloud, and the bow shall be in the cloud, and I will remember you. And the use of the bow, and he has bent his bow like an enemy, and the white horse and had a bow, and here's the latest picture that was just released by NASA. What do you think of that? We better wake up, folks. And you know what I loved about this? NASA painted in an arrow to show the direction of the energy, and they painted in a green arrow. And you know what's also interesting about that? If you look closely at it, it looks like a brain. And you know what NASA says this is? The most bizarre thing they've ever photographed with Hubble. They said it is a cosmic crossbow. But what can you do? It doesn't make any difference. People don't care, because my church doesn't believe in that. That's obvious, but I mean, that's not the point. The point is, it's time when you're going to have to choose. I had to abandon religion because I wanted to find God, and that's my job. Now, the point here is, according to NASA, if you have electrons in the pineal gland of your brain. If the electron is stimulated, it will respond to the photon. Now, don't let that get you screwed up in your head, because it's very simple and it's nothing to screw you up. Very easy. A photon is an angle of light, you used to call them angels of light, coming down from above, and it's a messenger particle. That's what science calls them, and it impacts you at the pineal gland of your brain. But you've got to activate that pineal. You've got to do something. If you don't, then how are you going to get the message? Let me ask you this. If the mailman comes to your house and he puts the mail in your mailbox, are you going to sit home and say, well, I know there's mail there, but I'm not going to the mailbox because my pastor doesn't believe in that? Of course not. You're going to go to the mailbox. Well, you're going to go to the mailbox? Because you've got mail. Did you ever go to America Online? You have mail. You've got mail. But you know what? Unfortunately, you're not picking it up. And it's piled up in there. And some of the mail, some of the messages in there are how to overcome things that have been coming against your life that shouldn't be. But you've got to pick it up. And there's nobody can pick it up for you. Don't forget, you're not allowed to go in somebody else's mailbox. Let me just show you something. Let me show you overhead 266, page 1. And we're getting ready for a special guest in just a minute. I just want to show you something. Here, okay? This is from the National Aeronautics and Space Agency. I don't use New Age stuff here, and I don't use religious stuff here. I want people that know what they're talking about. And I have found in both of the other groups I have problems. Okay? So I'm talking about the pineal gland. There are electrons in your pineal gland because there are atoms. Okay. So you want to stimulate the electrons in your pineal gland to receive the photons, which is the messenger. Is that possible? Bring that up a little bit, Joan. Here's what NASA says. Photons of light, okay, photons can respond to electrons. I don't want to hear anything from anybody else. I don't really care what anybody else says. I know there's electrons in your pineal gland. I know there's electrons in your body. And I know that photons are angles of light, which are messenger particles. And NASA has said photons can respond to electrons. Now, how are you going to stimulate the electrons to get that photon to respond to it? Angels of God, messengers of God, responding to things that happen inside of you. And this shouldn't frighten anyone, because all the time I've been in church, you know, you see people like this. Or they're kneeling down and they're going like that. What are they doing? Really, what are they doing? They are trying to make contact with God. Something is going on inside of their head. Sometimes they take and they put their head in their hands, or sometimes, whatever they're doing, they're trying to make something happen inside of their head. Well, now we see how it's done. When an electron is active in here, it invites the photon. Now, since angels of light or God or light, it would seem reasonable till we take this into the darkness and stimulate the pineal gland. The question is, however, is it possible to stimulate a part of the body? Can you do that? Because if you can't do it, then Jesus is saying if your eye be single, you can forget that. I'm going to turn that off. Al, if you get a chance, you want to turn this light on. Is it possible to direct desire to a particular part of the body and get it to do something that it's not doing? Specifically, would it be possible for you and me to stimulate the light receptor of the body, the pineal gland? Because if it is, then NASA has told us we're going to attract the angels of light. Is it possible? Now, Al Bianchi has been coming here and joining us as a part of this family for many years. In fact, that's when Al first showed up at the back door of Gordon's restaurant. We used to do that in Gordon's restaurant. We used to do this in Gordon's restaurant. And Albert and Ethel came in one night, and you know, been coming ever since. And Albert contributes immeasurably to this. Okay. Well, I was at a wedding with Albert last week, and we were talking. One of the things I've talked with about Albert, because he had a stroke. And so he has a paralysis on one side of his body. Once you I thought you want to get Albert seated there. He has a paralysis on one side of his body. And I was talking to him because the scientists today are doing something very interesting. They're working with people who have had strokes, and they are getting people to actually use their arms that have been paralyzed, some for 17 years. They had one fellow who had a stroke. His arm had been paralyzed for 17 years, and now they have him using his arm again. And what the doctors have said is that what they have done is they've retrained the brain to stimulate that part of the body that was not functioning. Well, Albert is not functioning on the right side of his body. And so I talked to Albert about this, and him and I both said, well, wow, this is something interesting. We want to watch this. They've only done it with 13 people so far. But obviously, my goodness gracious, can you ever imagine what it would mean to Albert if he could start using his arm and his leg again? I mean, you know, well, they're talking about it now. It's in an early stage, but they're talking about it. But anyhow, when I was talking to Albert, he started telling me the story about his stroke and about some of the situations that developed and what he did. And I thought, wait a minute, he's just answered this, this question, can we stimulate the pineal gland? So let me introduce Albert for you, especially for those who have not been here or on the television side. And what I want to do here is share with these people what you were telling about your stroke. Now, your right side is paralyzed right now. And tell me when it happened and a little bit about that.
Physically, what happens to you is that you get a complete right side, completely uncontrolled, minded, including legs, arms, nothing happens, including speech or talking about it because it's on the right side over here, and the blood is in the spot which has been hemorrhaged, and it's also called the temporal lobe, and it's burned out. So you don't speak because your idea of talking comes by your brain, which functions, it comes to that lobe, but there's no response.
Let me ask you then. So here you have the stroke. The say next day or a couple of days or whatever, you're lying here.
Oh, by the way, excuse me. I think it might be important in terms of Bill. Just it came to me. For 3 days you sleep. It's interesting.
3 days. 3 nights.
But it's dark.
Yeah.
You sleep.
Okay.
Okay?
Now, here you are, and you're in this state where you cannot talk.
Not at all.
Not a word.
Not a word.
And yet the doctors are standing around and they're talking.
Yes?
And you can hear them.
Yes. Unfortunately. The physician...
But just before you tell us, you're very alert. I mean, a person that has a stroke, their mind is extremely alert.
The mind is all right. The thing is that physically you can't show a thing. The physician looks at you and he told me it's just too damn bad that he'll be a vegetable.
Now, wait a minute. You're laying there and you heard this.
Oh, yeah, sure. Look, I'm looking at him. I can't move.
You can't move, you can't say anything, and he says it's too damn bad, he's going to be a vegetable. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, so now, here we go. Something then kicks in inside of you, and you start to plan in whatever way. What did you do?
Yes, it has to. That tells me that they're not going to heal me. I'm in medicine also. I know there was nothing that they can do for me, so I better find out something about myself. And
how old were you when you had it?
unfortunately, it's 44.
Okay.
The point is that other than physical things that the people did to straighten me out and standing up, and I did, the thing that I was most interested in, and I think Bill is talking about this, and this was most important for me, I had to
Speak.
Yes. But the temporal lobe on that side was filled with blood, and it cannot and will not work.
No, let me just, for a second. Your right side is paralyzed, you're not able to speak, and the action for this is actually stimulated from the left side.
Yes.
So that would be the thinking side or whatever, and that's shot. I mean,
Shot.
Okay. So now, either you're going to have to get the right side to do it, or somehow get this left side to come out of this state. You don't know which, but so what'd you do?
Right. So I have no temporal lobe, but there is something there. There's no question about it. Anybody that studies the left and right parts of your brain is essentially the same, but specialists come on one side and others do not. So therefore, there are parts, fibers that are present. And all I had, most people that have had a right
Paralysis on the right
paralysis.
side. Yeah.
What happens is that you have you can't speak, so you grunt, all right? And your voice is very high, but you grunt, and that's the rest of your life is going to be. But what happened to me, there are many things that you say to yourself, what are you interested in? What do you need in life? And mine was I had to know to speak. I had to. I can think it, but I can't bring that idea that I had in my brain to an area that's filled with blood, had to come out to the mouth. What happened is I tried very much to talk, and a teacher, a speech teacher, who got me very angry, was teaching me like boy and girl, very small ideas. He was thinking that he'll try and bring me up. Well, I almost killed him. There was nothing wrong. There was nothing wrong with my brain. Communication to get to the mouth. Somehow or another person came, and a woman, and I was really, and she asked me, and I asked her in my own way, not speaking now. This is about 3 months have passed. No speech. This woman, she wanted to know from me what I wanted. And I said, please try poetry. It seems like I can try something. And she did. At any rate, we pushed. Now, I mean, all day, not she, me. I had to speak every single day. I had to, and I forced, this sounds silly, I forced my right side to come out.
There you go.
And
in other words, you made it do something it couldn't do.
That's
or
right.
It wasn't doing. It could do it, but you actually insisted
yes.
that it do what it
Yes.
wasn't doing.
Yes, and I said that. And I literally said that. Speak. And little at a time. My voice came out all right. I'm not sound exactly the same. The words were said. I can speak now. I wasn't care about where, how well or anything.
But you just insisted
Yes.
that whatever it was inside of you, you insisted that it start to work.
Yes. And I actually ordered my brain to work constantly. I think I was even thinking in my sleep.
You just wouldn't let it alone.
No. And after I let that go on and on and on and on, and I realized that things are moving, about the 4th, the 5th month, I'm getting something, and all I needed was an idea that it was real, and then until about a year or things are going okay. And of course it's never been okay, but that's where we are.
Now, as a result of your experience, you've had an experience here that most people have not had yet. But as a result of your experience, that I would ask you the question that I've been asking for the last 45 minutes. The idea or the concept here is the Bible says, if your eye be single, meaning you have to do something in order to stimulate this pineal gland of the brain. The Hindus would say to us, focus between your eyebrows, to do this. And, we would do that. But talking to somebody like you, you focused. You focused on a particular part, and you demanded, and you put the energy in there to cause something to happen that literally could not happen, but it did. So then I would ask you, as a scientist before you, do you feel then it is possible for a human being to send energy and to stimulate a particular part of the body?
That's precisely what happened, yes. Because it couldn't been redo the old way. It is new fibers. Its own on the other side of it.
Whether you gave over the work to the right side or stimulated the left side, you would never know. You don't know where it came from. But all you know is that you put the suggestion inside and worked with it, and it came to pass.
Yes.
And it didn't happen today, it didn't happen tomorrow, and it took you a period of time, but here you are.
Yes.
And you still, obviously, you still struggle with situations because you've had that,
Sure.
But on the other hand, you're able to communicate, and you're able to speak, and you're able to contribute an awful lot to what I do and so forth.
Precisely.
So you not only have been able to speak, but to convey the depth of, it's not boy and girl, but you talked about pineals and quantum and all the rest of the stuff.
Exactly.
Very good.
And before we terminate, I also want to say another thing. I cannot remember the sequence of words. In other words, whatever I said before, once I've said it, I can't say in that exact way of saying it exactly the same way. But I found out if I had the strength, again it's strength, to go on the other side, you can do that too, the sequence. See, I didn't care. See, what Bill is talking about, I must force it to work with
There
me.
you go. There you
It
go.
won't by itself.
There you go. And so then we could have people who are, in essence, meditating or whatever they're doing for thousands of years, and we still have a very disruptive world, but not following the instruction. You must opt to do this.
Yes.
You must opt to go into the darkness. You must opt to stimulate this and cause it to work.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Just stay right where you are. Yes.
Do you have to force it even now?
Joan wanted to know, do you have to force it even now?
Yes. Yes. Easier. But yes, you must.
Does anybody else have a question? Okay. What I would strongly suggest to you then is we've talked this morning about identifying in the Bible the fact that God is light, identifying the fact that the light receptor of the body is the pineal gland of the brain, and that the scriptures specifically tell us and instruct us to stimulate it. And here you have heard from a man who specifically instructed himself in the stimulation of a part of his body to cause an effect to happen. Now, what is so interesting about that? Joan, if you could get overhead 84 out.
Okay, can I interrupt? Albert did this prior to his knowledge, so innately it came from its own.
Yes, Albert wasn't studying this metaphysical stuff when he did this. This came as a result of something that he did. But just let me show you had a desire.
Yes.
And the desire was to speak.
Yes.
And you caused this to happen by the energy. 84. Is it 84 in there? 84. Rene Descartes, maybe? It's probably all the way back in the back. I just want to show you one thing, and then you'll be out of here. But it's important for you to see this. But what Rene Descartes said. Yeah, okay, there you go. All right, Albert, you just stay right there, and let me just show you this real quick. no, it's not 79 that I want 84. But this is Rene Descartes. What the world is an author? This is Rene Descartes who showed us about, and this is what he said, which was so important. He discovered the fundamental laws of reflection and science and light and so forth. Okay? Let me just stay with me for a minute here. Let me just show you what Rene Descartes said in Overhead 84. Okay? He said in Descartes' conception, making contact, the soul makes contact with the body at the pineal gland. Okay? The soul's contact with the body at the pineal gland. And now I want you to think of what Albert said and then what Rene Descartes said in the 1600s. The whole action of the soul, listen to this, Albert, consists in this, that solely because it desires something, it causes the little gland, the pineal, to which it is closely united, to move in a way to produce the effect which relates to the desire. Bingo. And there you fulfilled the words of Rene Descartes, who wrote that so many years ago. So please take it seriously, and please consider it for your life, for your family's life, for your children, so that you can start to flow in the harmony of this new time of DNA and healings and so forth and so on. And to fulfill the very scriptures that you've treasured as a child in your church. See ya. Thanks. Bye-bye.